Lewis Hamilton is done. With bad qualifyings in Jeddah, of course, he is clearly making progress, being knocked out in Q1 in 2022, having a huge gap to Russell in 2023 and having a tiny gap to Russell in 2024. Otherwise, qualifying in Jeddah went the same as usual. Too easy for Max Verstappen, but let's break it down and find out all interesting details. And let's start with track breakdown. Jeddah Corniche circuit is actually a pretty nice and unique circuit with a unique character, which is clearly divided in two parts. First part is very twisty and technical section all the way to the Latifi corner, and the second part is basically straights with several corners between them, which creates a unique situation. On one side you wanna have a high downforce due to the dominance of high-speed and medium-speed corners throughout the first sector of the track, but then you have long straights, so you want a low downforce setup, and a good 60% of the circuits are just straights, so teams tend to pick up low downforce setup, which makes this twisty and technical section even harder for drivers. In terms of overtakeability, I would say that this track is mediocre. We have two main overtaking zones in turn 1 and turn 27 due to hard braking zones just before the corners, also with back-to-back DRS zones. Also this DRS zone kinda helps a following car to stick closer to the target, but track itself is not so easy to overtake, unlike Bahrain, for example. The other thing worth mentioning is that the giveaway meta of 2022 season was actually born on this exact track. But this problem is kinda solved because DRS detection zone was moved from the enter of the corner to the exit of the corner. So no such problems. And let's move on to tire breakdown. 3 medium compounds tire for this weekend, pretty much as usual for Jeddah. We see a nice contrast with tons of lateral stress on tires, especially on right tires, and with green or yellow longitudinal stress on tires, all due to the fact that even on the second half of a circuit, despite it being mostly flat out, we still have those fast twitches which add the lateral stress on tire, and we only have two main and hard braking zones, so longitudinal stress is not so high. Asphalt abrasion is pretty low, unlike in Bahrain, which also allows for softer compounds of tires. Pirelli estimates track evolution on 4, which I kinda disagree with, especially after current qualifying session. I would rate it as 2 or maybe 3. And we also see low downforce, which I just told you about. High surface temperature also add up to the track itself, and historically it is pretty hard for teams to find a perfect setup for both qualifying and race. But let's move on to Q1. Q1 was quite an intense session, with no clear first and second attempt. Track was busy pretty much for the whole session, which is quite remarkable and was interesting to watch. Biermann was making his F1 debut already starting in Ferrari, because Carlos Sainz faced some appendix problems. And his results were really impressive, especially due to the fact that it was his first day in a car, and on this specific track he even was ahead of Charles Leclerc in some point of the qualifying session, which resulted in a legendary react from his father. Just look at this absolute chat of a man. Haas was surprisingly fast on this specific track, which can tell us that they are pretty good in fast corners in terms of downforce generated by the car, and also in terms of top speed. Sauber team tried to fix Guan Yu Zhou's car all the way till the final 2 minutes, and they actually managed to do so. Guan Yu had 1 minute 50 seconds to make his outlap, and he just fell off short. 2 mini-sectors divided him from actually starting his hot lap. Pretty unlucky for Sauber team. Logan Sargent was gapped once again. Alpine F1 is still nowhere. which is pretty disappointing because this track differs very much from Bahrain track and they are slow on both those tracks. Really bad news for Alpine F1 team. And Zhou's teammate Valtteri Bottas also didn't manage to make it out of Q1. Also, I should say that there was a lot of oversteer going out of the last corner. Oscar Piastri made a double touch of the wall. Also, Biermann was oversteering a lot in that corner, but overall P9 for him in Q1 is really impressive. First day in the car, for example, Nico Hülkenberg several years ago in similar situation was nowhere, and he was already an experienced driver. And just like that, we move on into Q2 and we move on into problems with Nico Hülkenberg's car. Ferrari engine had a failure which caused a red flag, and before red flag only 4 drivers were able to make their times, with everyone else making the first attempt after red flags. And we see Tsunoda started to outperform Daniel Ricciardo. Biermann faced some further problems trying to push the car as much as he could, locking up the tires in turn 4, facing an oversteer going out of turn 22 in the last sector, which is basically a penultimate real corner. But still he was really close to making it out of Q2, just 0.04 of a second between him and Lewis Hamilton, who was still nowhere in comparison to George Russell. Alonso was gapping Lance Stroll as usual, Verstappen was gapping Sergio Perez as usual, and Piastri also as usual is really strong in Jeddah despite the overall trend between teammates in McLaren. Q3 was a pretty interesting session. Mercedes actually decided to open up with old soft tires, which can make a difference in tomorrow's race. Still a huge gap between Russell and Hamilton. Also both Red Bulls had a faster first attempt than second attempt, unlike Alonso and Leclerc, because they managed to improve the times and they were actually fighting for P2. And Leclerc managed to be just a little bit faster than Perez and Fernando, really close times here. And we also see a trend that Red Bull was the only car that managed to make it out of 28 seconds in third sector, and third sector is basically only straight lines, which tells about that Red Bull is still dominant in terms of top speed. Both Mercedes were struggling in sector 1. Russell failed to adapt to the new tires on the last attempt, but even on new tires Hamilton could not be faster than the first attempt of George Russell. Yes, in the end of the day the gap is pretty small, but still a poor performance from Lewis. And Tsunoda making the most out of Q3, being faster than Lance Stroll, pretty good performance from him. But of course the whole qualifying session was once again a flawless, easy win for Max Verstappen. And let's move on to the starting grid and to race prediction. Actually, Charles Leclerc has some chances in fighting Max Verstappen. If he will manage to not fall off out of DRS zone in first 2 laps, he could neutralize the lack of top speed in Ferrari car and actually stick with Max Verstappen. The thing is though, he shouldn't try to overtake him as fast as possible, because he will immediately lose DRS. He should just try to stick with him as long as possible, maybe for the whole race, and then planning to have some strategical advantage or just making overtake in the later stages of the race. Perez may actually start to fall off this leading pair, even in a dominant car, because, well, it's Checo, we all know him, but which in itself may present this whole group with a good chance of sticking to the Red Bull top, which will elevate the whole top 8 from the bottom 12 of the grid. This pack of drivers may also be really small. It will be interesting to see how many mistakes will Biermann make in his first GP with basically no practice, and what will be the difference in racing pace between himself and Charles Leclerc. Now, both Haas actually underperformed in qualifying, so they may gain some places during the race and may even fight for the points. And this is pretty much it. Thank you very much for your view. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and see you soon.